So our next speaker will be familiar to anyone who paid attention to the Boston mayor's race we had recently, because in that crowded field, she was the only woman in the race. That's Charlotte Golar Richie. Welcome, Charlotte. I also want to note that Charlotte was a former Peace Corps volunteer. I think you served, was it Kenya in the early 1980s, I think? And it was interesting, when I was doing some research on Charlotte, there was an award called the Franklin Williams Award. Franklin Williams was the former Peace Corps Regional Director for Africa and the US Ambassador to Ghana. And this is an award given to returned Peace Corps volunteers of color who continue the Peace Corps mission through their commitment to community service. And I think that tells you that the way Charlotte has lived her life has been a Peace Corps kind of life. You know, it wasn't just a 2-year blip on your radar screen. It's been the way I gather that you've approached everything you've done professionally since. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I also want to note, and Charlotte, I hope I don't embarrass you with this, and this is not from Wikipedia, I have this on good authority, that early in Charlotte's career, she had briefly had a career as an actress. You did some off-Broadway work, and also I think in some little minor roles in soap operas. But I did come across a Globe story that said that she has the air of a celebrity. So I think that sums up very well that actress portion of your life. So this is Charlotte Golar Richie.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and it's really good to be here. I hope I'm not talking too loudly. I'm thrilled to be here, and I have a connection with UMass in that I am a vice chair for the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy, and I want to thank Chancellor Keith Motley and Director Ann Bookman and Dean Ira Jackson for this opportunity to connect with this wonderful institution. And as a product of public university education, having gone to Rutgers, I know what this means for so many people. So I'm here to share with you a little bit about my background, my experience. And the reason I want to do that is because I am about opening doors for others. I'm big on mentoring our young people who share a passion for public service. And so I'm going to share with you today my journey, a journey that has brought me to where I am today, and a few lessons that I learned along the way, and how I've applied them to the positions that I've held and the work that I do. I also want to share with you this journey because it's not often that you get to hear from someone, a black woman, 55 years of age, here in Boston, who ran for mayor. And frankly, while not everybody is interested, there are still a lot of people who are. How do I know that? Because people come up to me in the street, at the bus stops, in the grocery store, wherever, and they have a lot of questions to ask me. And they ask me about, what is it like being in public service? What was it like running for elective office under the glare of the media spotlight? What is it like being married and having children and juggling work-family obligations? And what is it like winning elective office, which I have done, and losing, and working with a mayor and working with a governor and volunteering in the Peace Corps? To be sure, my journey hasn't been a straight line, nor has it been a ladder with rungs, a ladder that is reaching skyward, or a gentle, babbling brook that carries me away. It hasn't been any of those things. It's been quite different. Frankly, it has been a bit of a mixed bag at times. There are things that I've tried, things that I failed, things where I achieved, things that went well, things that didn't go so well. There were times when my luck kicked in and when my luck ran out. There were times, rare times, but still times there, time to time, that I was able to wonder about doing things differently. And what about if I tried to do what I didn't do so well again? Opportunities have popped up during this journey of mine, and usually they popped up when it was least expected. The key for me was to be ready and to handle these things as they came my way. So, forget about the career path being a straight line. How about a jungle gym? I want to try that. It's not I can't take it as a new idea or an idea that I own all to myself. I borrowed it from my daughter, Cara, who's with me here today, and she borrowed it from someone else. But I liked it, and I thought I would share it with you today. It does describe more accurately my journey as being less linear and more complex. More like this jungle gym with a collection of metal bars stacked on top of each other, leading upward. You got to use your brain to figure out where to grab hold, and you have to figure out how to get your footing right, and then you need the physical strength and the stamina to swing yourself up onto a bar and to start climbing. But it doesn't take that long before you get the hang of it and before you know it, and you've learned how to climb, and you keep climbing. I've learned how to climb, and I've learned that you don't need to know exactly where you'll end up on the jungle gym to move about and have a good time. You can find yourself in interesting spots where you can make friends and maybe, if needed, offer a helping hand to someone along the way. For me, on nearly every stop along my journey, I've been able to give back, to pay it forward, to mentor, to coach, to advocate, to follow and lead. I've worked in diverse communities with people from all walks of life, all the while championing fairness and equality and opportunity, buoyed by the love and support of friends and family. And family is where it all began for me. That's my mom and dad. They were born in the late 1920s, and they grew up during World War II and the Great Depression. They experienced racism and poverty, suffered from illness and injury, yet they made it to college, broke through racial and gender and economic barriers, and in the end, they achieved the American dream. After college, they met and married and had 2 daughters. While their marriage did not last, they stayed connected and committed as co-parents, raising my sister, Catherine, and me. My dad grew up in a small segregated town in South Carolina and was part of the migration of millions of African Americans who left the South heading north and west to escape Jim Crow and find freedom and opportunity. My dad found opportunity, yes he did, in New York City, where he served in high-level positions in government. Now here he is with, it's probably late 1960s, early 1970s, and he's there with Mayor John Lindsay. He taught me the value of public service, no doubt about that. He taught me not to fear the mantle of leadership and to champion fairness, justice, and equality. My mom was the daughter of West Indian immigrants. She grew up in Harlem, where she was active in a sorority with a public service mission. She taught in New York City public schools and later was a housing manager. From her, I learned to appreciate books, music, and art. She was multi-talented and could do a whole bunch of neat things. She could sew, she could play the piano, she could sing, she could play the piano and sing at the same time. She loved Sunday school, she loved cards and books and games. She taught me all kinds of things, like especially how to laugh out loud and enjoy the company of friends and family. She was a lot of fun to be around. She also taught me frugality and how to save pennies and do for yourself. It was my parents who met me on the path, sorry, let's see if I can go back. Pardon. It's my parents who put me on the path to college. If not for them, I would not have gone to college at all. Having an education got me through a few doors. And it helped me get jobs, it helped me go to grad school, it helped me go to college, and on to career success. However, there was no guarantee that my education would put me onto that path of success. Again, it was a jungle gym of paid and volunteer work, temp jobs, stints in retail and TV production where I worked as a production assistant. And I was able to help work at WNET, public television, filing films and doing things like that. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. I even tried my luck at acting, as Sasha said, landing a couple of extra roles on daytime soaps, and later I worked as part-time volunteer as a reporter. So I want to be like Sasha. And then when it came to really career prep, and this is going to get into the heart of what I want to share with you today. I want to share with you my background, of course, because I didn't get here by myself. I stand on the shoulders of my parents. I stand on the shoulders of my community and people who came before me. But an experience that I had that was pivotal, that was transformative, that was totally enlightening, was my experience in the Peace Corps. And you've heard the saying, it's the toughest job you'll ever love. I know David Magnani, former state senator, is here, and he served in the Peace Corps. Maybe there are others of you here today. But I think he would agree, right, David, that that was what it was for you, it was what it was for me. It's where I learned patience, it's where I learned advocacy, it's where I gained the skills to work with diverse communities. I learned about the kindness of strangers. And it does indeed take a village to raise a child. During my first year in the Peace Corps, I taught in a high school in the western part of the country near the Ugandan border, not too far from where President Obama's people come from. And during my second year, I was assigned to a school, as you can see in this picture. It was Jolore, about 25 miles from Kenya's northeast coast and the city of Malindi. Working in rural villages for about 2 years where the majority of Kenyans live in extreme poverty, on about $1 a day, I gained a fuller appreciation for our systems of transportation and communication and for the environment. When it came to transportation in Kenya, well, who knows how long you'd have to wait for a bus, so I learned to walk. And no surprise, communication was equally as challenging. There were no phones, there were no faxes. This is pre-internet era. And so it took 2 weeks to get a piece of mail from home. And it was also challenging trying to talk to people one-on-one. So I spent a lot of time reading and trying to learn the language because I wasn't fluent in Swahili and I wasn't fluent in the various local dialects. The environment and our natural resources was something else that I needed to learn or really acquire an appreciation for. Here in this country, many of us do take these things for granted. But in Kenya, they were critically important for me to be able to survive. And I felt it because there was an inadequate supply of fresh water, clean water, and that issue exists today, not just in Kenya, but all over the globe. While many in my village had to resort to drawing water from a nearby parasite-ridden river to cook and bathe, I tried to just catch water, rainwater, during rainy season and other months, hoping that that would be how I would manage to take a bath and cook my food. And I was vigilant, even in the middle of the night. As soon as I heard the first drop hit my roof, I'd grab my bucket and basin and race outside to catch rainwater. Well, I could catch enough water to serve my needs. I started to think about my neighbors. I started to worry about them. And so what I learned after that was advocacy. And I learned how to advocate. And I learned that I could not be content. I could not be happy just having for myself. I wanted my neighbors to do well too. So I went to the US Embassy and I said, we need your help. And I encouraged and I persuaded and insisted, and they responded and at least provided us with a grant for research and development to start that water tank that the community needed. That was not something that was in my job description as a volunteer. And in fact, a lot of the things that I have done in my life were not part of my job description. And probably you all who are here today, it's very much the same case for you. But we were happy that we could at least begin to address that particular issue, but there's so many other issues. But it was in Kenya, the language, the cross-cultural skills, the ability to survive, to be happy without a whole lot of material possessions. These are the things that I learned, the intangibles who have made who I am today. And I learned that there is a wide world out there, and I learned that not only with my former students, but with all the young people I have encountered. There are young people all over this globe who want to connect to jobs and education and want a chance to learn, work, and excel and have impact, and they want to be able to provide for their families, and we need to care about them. The wide world of ours led me to connect with a community in Haiti, the island of Haiti and communities there in Port-au-Prince and outside. And that the realization that we're all connected, no man, woman is an island, motivated me to join a group of civic leaders in 2010 to travel to Haiti, which had been devastated by an earthquake. There we tried to do our small part to help delivering tents and supplies to neighborhoods that were really devastated and damaged by that earthquake. On my return from Kenya, I was ready to settle down and start my family, and this was just before I went to Haiti. And I wanted to contribute to building a community, and part of my trip to Haiti was that, to try to do community building. I married a guy who was in the Peace Corps with me, and he trained my group, and that's Winston. You've seen him before since I advanced a little too quickly on the slide. But those are my daughters, Lee and Cara, and they're all grown up now. And it was with Winston that we created a wonderful family, and we had 2 beautiful daughters, and we had mutual respect for cultural diversity, and we knew something about community building, and he had his own personal experience in Kenya, but also growing up in Ohio in a family of activists who were among the first families to integrate Shaker Heights, Ohio, breaking through barriers and housing segregation. For the last 30 years, the 2 of us together have built a life filled with friends and allies focused on family, community, politics, and giving back. And giving back is what I have tried to make my life about. So even though I am not, as they say, OFB, originally from Boston, and even though I didn't grow up in the neighborhood of Dorchester where I've lived for all these many years, Boston is my home, and it's where I've raised my family. And I love this city. I moved here in 1985 to join Winston, who had landed a pretty good job at John Hancock. And after we moved into our house in Dorchester, we got involved in the community. I was a reporter. I was working for free for a community newspaper, and I was also working later on a cable show for a little bit of money while I worked a full-time job and also raised my kids. But I wanted to be a reporter because I thought that I would be able to tell the truth about things going on in my community, at least in a way that others weren't telling it. But people in my community saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And that was that they thought that I could be a good leader, not only a keen observer, but also someone who could take action. And they asked if I would consider running for office. And I said, well, I've never done that. I wouldn't even know how to start. But people mentored me and helped me, gave me advice. And in 1994, I jumped out there, thinking I had nothing to lose, and I would apply all my skills and all my abilities and my belief that we can make change, each and every one of us, if we get out there and try. And I ran. And I ran. And remember, I told you I knew how to walk in Kenya? Well, now I was walking all over the neighborhood. And I was knocking on doors, and this is, no Facebook, Twitter, and all of that stuff. So this is old-fashioned politics, knocking on doors, talking to people where they are, and trying to get them to believe in you and believe in your vision for what could be. And people did. And in 1984, in the fall, in November, people went to the polls, and they pulled the lever. That's what we had then, levers in the ballot box. And I won. And I'm grateful for having had the support of people in my community, because I worked as hard as I could a few months later, advocating, legislating, caucusing, facilitating, organizing. I joined the Black Caucus, and there I am with members of the Black Caucus, now the Black and Latino Caucus, and Governor Paul Cellucci. And I joined the Women's Caucus and the Boston delegation, and I spoke from the bottom of my heart, the passion in my heart for housing, affordable housing, pay increases for direct care workers, against trash transfer stations and dumping that was going on in my neighborhood, in support of policies that would open doors to women and people of color, in support for civil unions, even before people were talking about same-sex marriage and even thinking that that could be a possibility in our state. I was elected 3 times to the House and then was able to serve as a committee chair, get legislation passed, and I hired a great group of women, as you see here. I did try to hire a guy. I don't discriminate. But the men at that time were not lining up to work for me, interestingly. That did change later on. But I think people wanted to check me out first and see what kind of leader is she going to be. But these young women were happy to work with me. And you might even notice one with a scarf around her neck. Anybody know who she is? That's State Senator Linda Dorsina-Forey. And then to the right of her, you might notice who she is. That's Tina Sherry. Some of you march in her annual March for Peace in our city. It's a Mother's Walk for Peace. Anybody been in that walk? Well, I encourage you to join me for that because it's a wonderful annual event. And I have been in politics and government for 20 years since that time. And I've mentored a lot of different people, a lot of women and men, who've gone on to do some very exciting and meaningful things. Recognize anybody in this photo? Well, that's our mayor. Then a state rep, Marty Walsh, along with Speaker Tom Finneran, who appointed me as a committee chair when I was in the legislature. Mayor Walsh and I served briefly in the House together, and we supported all kinds of initiatives to improve life in our adjacent districts in Dorchester. I left the legislature in 1999 after celebrating the enactment of a housing bond bill that I had written with support from housing advocates all over the state, and then after taking my very last vote against reinstatement of the death penalty in Massachusetts. And now here I am with my former supervisor. That's Mayor Tom Menino, who we are thinking about and praying for and honoring his work. Well, I was in his administration for 8 years, and we got to know each other during my days as a state rep. And I asked him to come out and walk the neighborhood with me. And he did it, didn't even hesitate. He also came up to the State House when I was a state rep. I asked him to testify in support of this housing bond bill that I filed. He didn't hesitate, he came right up, and he spoke in favor of it. And then the housing bond bill passed, and Mayor Tom Menino invited me to come and join his administration. And I was thrilled to do so. And the housing bond bill money that was made available with the passage of the legislation enabled us to build thousands of units of housing in the city, thousands of homes and apartments that were needed by people, working people, people who have no income, who are homeless, all kinds of people, families, seniors, and that's the kind of thing that we did together. After working with the mayor for 8 years, I then was able to go and join Governor Deval Patrick in his administration, so I've worked at the state level too. And with Governor Patrick, we were able to advance his legislative agenda, but also open doors. Remember how I mentioned how important that is, opening doors. Opening doors to Western Mass with the opening of a Springfield office. Opening doors to the disabled community and underrepresented communities with an office of access and opportunity. And opening doors to young people by launching the governor's very successful statewide youth council, which exists to this day. And the council was a great learning experience for me, listening to the concerns of young people. Very, very important for all of us to do that, to find ways to elevate the voices of our young people, to give them opportunities to be heard, especially when policies and programs affect their lives so profoundly. They need to be heard and they need to be engaged. These are young people who I worked with when I joined a national nonprofit organization called Youth Build USA, and I still serve on the board of that organization. These are the young people I'm talking about. They're young people of every hue, from all communities across this wide country of ours. They're in the rural areas in Appalachia. They're in the urban areas in Watts, in the south side of Chicago. They're everywhere. They're on Indian reservations. And they all want the same thing. They want to have a chance to really make it in this country, and we should be there for them. And that is a commitment that I have made to, for as long as I can, to work with them to see that our young people, particularly those who are of modest means and have no opportunity, can make it. My time has run out, but I will say quickly that Governor Patrick gave me an opportunity to return to state government. And I am now serving as the commissioner for the Mass Commission Against Discrimination. And for anyone who wonders if discrimination is one of those issues that's no longer relevant, it was a problem of the past. It's 50 years ago that we passed the Federal Civil Rights Act, right? So that's a dead issue. We don't have discrimination anymore, do we? Well, I can tell you, you can come over to One Ashburton Place where I work and come into our waiting room and see the number of people who are waiting there. And I know it's kind of confusing because we've had great gains. We have a black president and a black governor, and we now have policies and practices that acknowledge those with disabilities, and we have health care now for those who are in same-sex marriages, and we've made some progress. But I can assure you that we have a ways to go. So that's the work I'm doing now. And I'm going to end with this final thought, because I did start out with that metaphor about a jungle gym, but I'm going to end with a mountain. And this is a mountain I got to look at when I went to, when I was in Kenya and I got to go down to Tanzania. I didn't climb it, but I did look at it, and I hope I'll have an opportunity one day to try. But my dad liked to say, he liked to talk about life as mountains. So he didn't talk about a jungle gym. But he said, life is like mountains. No sooner do we climb one mountain than we find ourselves in the foothills of mountains yet to be climbed. So I've climbed my share of mountains, and I'll continue climbing them. But I hope that I will be blessed, and I pray that each and every one of you will be as well, to find yourselves in interesting places, to make a contribution to those around us to make this a better world. Thank you.
Charlotte, thank you. So I want to ask you a question about your general life philosophy, but before I do that, I wondered actually if you could tell us a little bit about some of your MCAD work in terms of, are there things you feel like need to be on the public's radar about the kind of discrimination that you're seeing? Are there new trends in it emerging?
So, as I was saying that, typically when we think of discrimination, and that's not everybody, but a lot of people think of race. But discrimination can happen, it can happen anywhere and to anyone. And without knowing each of you personally, I would hazard a guess to say that everyone here is in a protected class, either because of your national origin, because of your race, because of your ability to move around, because you've been a veteran, whatever the case may be, because of your sexual orientation. So the laws are there to protect everyone. And what we are seeing are things like, while when my mother went back to, when she went to work after having me, and when she was pregnant with my sister, she had to leave when she started to show. Those days are over. We've got women now who are in the workplace and they're having babies. But what we have seen is that women come back to work and their job has been restructured, or it's no longer there. And that's not a good thing, okay? So that sort of thing. Or questions around the kind of health care that can be offered to same-sex couples, or when someone feels they have been discriminated against, a supervisor or HR person doesn't know how to handle it, and they stop talking to the person, and so there's retaliation, and we see those complaints coming in. But whatever it is, our job is to help to reduce and hopefully to one day eradicate discrimination in the Commonwealth, and I'm proud to be able to do that.
So on your life philosophy, I love the idea of life as jungle gym rather than a straight line and as less linear. And you were making me think of a woman we interviewed recently on WBUR. Her name is Ellen Langer. She works at Harvard. She's considered the mother of mindfulness, this principle of being in the moment. But she said something that I actually wrote down because I was so struck by it. She said that stress is about something you assume is going to happen in the future. And very often, when it's happening, you assume it's going to be awful. And she said that her line was, no worry before it's time. And I like the idea of that, but I remember thinking in practice, when we're about to make decisions that might take us off a charted path, you do have to sort of consider the pros and the cons. So I was trying to reconcile Ellen Langer's approach about don't worry, just do it, with wanting to make smart decisions and make sure you're going down the right path. So I guess I want to know what your philosophy has been when you've taken these leaps into new jobs, how you quell any fears, how you balance the pros and cons, and make sure it's more of an adventure, you're not derailing yourself somehow.
Right, no, that's right. I mean, I wouldn't advise anybody to jump off a cliff without their parachute or checking their parachute, right? I think that while people might say that I've taken chances and risks, I have been blessed to have the support of family. I have. So I was able to pay the rent. I was able to pay the mortgage. I have a wonderful network of friends and people that I can look to if I get into trouble. So you want to manage through these kind of opportunities, I'll say, in terms of seizing the day. You want to be able to do that with your eyes open, and you want to make sure that you are protected as you move forward through life.
And Charlotte, you are someone who had wanted to be mayor. So I'm interested in your seat now. What do you most want for the city? What do you most think the city needs?
So, and you know that I've supported the mayor who is there, Mayor Walsh, and I am hopeful that he will be very successful because his success means success for every one of us who live in the city and work here and care about the city. I talked a little bit about young people. I feel that young people are not just our future, they are our here and now. And I just see too many of them. In the country, there's something like 6.8 million young people who are disconnected from work and school. So that's a lot of people, and we got to care about them. And I think he is going to make that a priority. He's told me that's something he cares about as well. And so I am hopeful that we will see that realized here in the city.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sasha.
You're welcome. Thank you.